Hi everyone, welcome to Book of Katherine. Today I want to just do a very quick video on the definition of humility. I have been hearing that word, it's kind of like a buzzword on YouTube lately about humility. What is humility? So I heard an excellent definition of humility when I was younger, and I have used it ever since. So a person is humble when they see themselves as no greater than they are, and they see themselves as no less than they are. And they got that definition from like an ancient, like they learned the languages of like ancient, like scripts from like 2,000 years, like thousands of years ago or something, of like one of the very first times humility was actually, the word was actually used. And it really clicked for me. I was like, okay, because the word humble can be like, oh, you know, you should be humble, and people think, oh, put myself down. Like, oh, I should put myself down and I should put myself down. But it really made sense to me when it was like, no, like humility is like, don't put yourself higher than you are. Like, don't think of yourself as more than you are. Like, if you are at grade 9, if you're reading at a 9th grade reading level, don't think that you're reading like rocket scientist. You're not a rocket scientist. But you're also not a 5th grade reading level. Don't ever accept that you are a 5th grade reading level. Humility is knowing exactly where you are and accepting that. That's why, like, Abraham Lincoln was humble, and yet he wrote extremely strong words. He had words of strength because he was grounded, and he was firm because he knew exactly where he was. He didn't think he was less than he was. He knew exactly where he was. He knew what he was meant to do and where he was. And he knew his worth. He knew exactly where his worth was. And he didn't devalue himself. The same goes for Martin Luther King. There is an amount of value that they put on themselves, and they never put themselves lower than that. And that is something that's being done all across the board. I'm hearing it all across the internet, is that the word humble or humility, it's happening again where it's like, oh, put yourself lower. And you can put yourself into kind of like a spiraling thing of fear or shame for people who are trying to make others happy. Or if they've been in an abusive home, or especially if you come from an alcoholic household or a dry alcoholic place, if you come from an addictive household and a family system, which, oh my gosh, so many people are now, when you come from that kind of a system, oh boy, like that's such a trigger, because then you think that you should be humble and you think you should be less than you are, and it triggers that thing in your head of your family member, your parents, and your parental thing of like, oh, you should think you're less than you are, think that you're less than you are, and you start digging yourself into that hole. In order to be good, you have to dig yourself low, and that's not actually the reality. Being humble for some of us, like for me, being humble, I had to start pulling myself up and seeing myself as at my worth. Like I had to really, when I learned the definition of the word, I had to, in order to be humble, I had to really start admitting where I was and not devaluing where I was. Like that's, and what they said was, and here was the thing that really got to me, like this was the thing that really got to me. They said that when you devalue yourself, that can be a false, we can wear that as like kind of a banner of false sense of humility. Like as a false sense of humility of being like, well, I'm less than this. And what it does is when you say, oh, I'm less than I am. Let's say that you have written 5 books and that you travel the world, right? Let's say that you've written 5 books and you travel the world. But when you go out and around, you have a problem. Like you have a problem with admitting that you are a world traveler and you've written 5 books and that you have a massive following everywhere. But you have been raised that is, you should not think highly of yourself. But you've done great things. But now that's at a clash in your head. Like, that's at a clash. And you're like, well, how do I say I've done great things? I've accomplished great things, but I'm supposed to be humble. Well, no. You are being humble if you say you've done great things. But a lot of people do a false sense of humility by saying, well, I'm actually not this great. Or, no, I'm sure this wasn't for me. And I'm sure, and constantly, and I know people that do this. You hear it every day on YouTube of people constantly putting themselves down. Great speakers, great, just people that you put on a pedestal and then they put themselves down. And someone who I think never puts themselves down, who is an amazing example of humility, and I don't know if he does this on purpose or not, but a perfect example of someone who's like right there for a perfect example of humility is Jordan Peterson. And I don't know if he does it on purpose. I don't think he even thinks about it. But I think that it's just because he's so logical. And he's so empirical. And he's just like, well, I have written 5 books and therefore I've written 5 books. And to say that he has not written 5 books would be incorrect. Does that make sense? Like, that would be inspiring. And he does. No, he does put himself down. Like, he never wants to admit that's true. He does do the thing. He never wants to admit that, oh, well, like, I have a lot of great followers and no one. And that, like, for example, that his false sense of humility got him in trouble with Kathy Newman. They set a trap for him. The left uses the right's false sense of humility. They use it. The left uses the right's false sense of humility to set traps all the time. If you notice at the end of that famous Kathy Newman interview, which I'll link it right here, the very last question she asks is, well, you have a lot of hateful people, right? And he's like, I don't think that I do. She goes, you do. And she has this look on her face. And I just turned to my husband and I was like, she knows. Like, it's planned. Like, because the very next thing that they do is, like, they have the hate storm go. And we now know that all that's manufactured. And, that's all that Twitter is the hate network. And it's how that they make a story. And when they have the whole thing go out and they say Kathy Newman's network says, oh, we had to bring in a specialist, which they probably did. They probably had the specialist already scheduled before, he even came in, because she ended with that question. And he should have known. Like, I probably would have been like, what, are you planning something? Like, because I am willing to believe that they are evil. Like, I am willing to believe, because I believe in their patterns. I understand their patterns. I'm willing to believe how evil and how strategic they are. I don't have a problem with that. I've been watching it. I'm just like, yeah, you are that low. Everyone's like, oh, they're so low. Really? Are we shocked by now? They've been doing it for 30 years. Have we not learned any lessons? Does that make sense? Like, start learning the patterns. Just like it's like clockwork. Like, they've got a pattern. Like, anyway, so I was like, oh, here it comes, right? So what she did is she did the whole thing and said, oh, we called in a hate specialist. And Peterson just was like, took the bait and wanted to be a nice guy and was like, oh, well, maybe because he's like, I don't think my followers are. And he was like, well, maybe my followers are, being that way. And he, for a moment, went into false humility. Maybe he didn't. He's the clinical psychologist. I could be totally wrong. But maybe not. But for a moment, for a moment, he did not stay true to what he knew his followers were. He's like, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. And he tweeted out and said, if any of you are hating on her, He accepted their reality just in the, maybe my followers are doing this. And I was like, your followers aren't. You know who your followers are. Never change your reality for them. You know who your followers are. You weren't thinking that before. The last question you said, you're like, my followers aren't like that. That's what you answered. Stay with that. Don't change for them. They are liars. We know they're liars. Like they lie. It's one voice. It's not an individual voice. So they use that and they hook it. And the next thing you know, like it just hooked. And next thing you know, the whole story is about, oh, he admitted that they must be doing it. And so the whole story is that now how horrible Jordan Peterson's fans are that they're attacking Kathy. But because by doing that, he confirmed the story that they were attacking him when they weren't. Does that make sense? And he said, I regret doing it. I regret doing it because I didn't see anyone doing it. But I ended up confirming the story. And I was like, yeah, like hook, line, and sinker. So it's really, really important. Like the left is expecting us to like, the rest of America, the other 90% to be nice people. They bank on us being nice. Which means, oh, we'll question our own reality in order to be nice. No, don't ever question your reality. Being humble is being exactly who you are and holding to that which you know is true. Humility is not thinking you're more than you are. You're not a rock star if you're not a rock star. But it's also not believing that you are less than you are. And I just was so glad to get that translation because it changed my life. Because boy, I sure did. I noticed that like I would say, oh, I'm not really. And it would end up fishing for compliments. I caught myself. I was much younger. I was like, that's just a way of fishing for compliments. I was getting something out of it by saying I was less than I was when I knew that I wasn't. I knew I was here. But I just say that I wasn't in order to get the compliment to feel better. No, and they were like, that's a false sense of humility. That's not real humility. That's false. And I was like, okay. So if someone says, great job, I say, thank you. That's humility. Is knowing exactly who you are, knowing your capabilities, and accepting them. It was a big lesson for me. I think it was a big, I think I can, now that I think about it, I just filmed a thing on being boss and I'm like, wow, that is a big part of being boss too, is just admitting you're right where you are, admitting your strengths, admitting your weaknesses, knowing it and holding to it and being like, yeah, I'm good at this. I'm good at this. I am. I'm good at this. And I own my achievements. Yeah, I wrote 5 books and I travel the world. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? I think that's amazing. Like, I feel really grateful that I'm as good at HTML coding as I am. And I do. I get twinges when I say it. Like, it hurts. It's always hard. It will always be hard. But the thing is that I know where that came from. I know that came from my abuse, but I fight through it because I know it's healthier to be humble and be right here. I know that's healthier than to go here and be like, oh, I'm only okay at HTML. No, I'm the bomb at HTML. Like I'm good. I'm really, really good. I may be one of the best. And when you do that over and over and over, you get used to it. And you get that strength and they can't move you. And that's how you start to, like, when they say, oh, she wears the clothes, they don't wear her. That's where that comes from, is when you know exactly who you are. And this is that first step. And I really hope it helps. And freaking it won't let you get like hook, line, and sinkered by the left anymore. It sure will help us not get taken over by the evil anymore. I don't want to be China. I don't. I don't want us to be a poverty-stricken nation. I don't want the people to be impoverished. I want the people to be wealthy like we were before. This is the first step. Be wealthy in spirit. Know exactly who you are. And if you're not skilled at anything, get over it and admit that. Admit right where you are. Because until you do that, you'll never ever move forward. It feels good to just figure out who you are. I'll do a video on where to go from there. Coming up. Love you guys. Bye.